Thank you all being here. We are beginning with our second talk, which will be followed by 3 other talks on 13th of December, 20th of December 2023, and 10th of January 2024. The first talk was scheduled for 8th of November, which was presented by Dr. P. Arun. With this, I would like to invite Professor Vishnu Mahapatra to kindly come forward and share his thoughts with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mumtaz. Thank you very much. I welcome you all, also our colleagues who are joined us online. And as some of you know, that we last term we had a series of talks on city and labor. And this term, and also spilling over to the next, we have our own postdoctoral fellows are presenting their work. And I'm very delighted that we are doing it. And Dr. Karthick actually is the very first postdoctoral fellow that joined the Nilgiri Hills Center for the Advanced Study in Humanities and Social Sciences. For those of us are very new, we'd like to say a couple of things about the center. The center actually was established in 2022, and its fundamental mandate actually is to invite, through a process of selection, postdoctoral fellows for a period of 2 years. And the purpose of this fellowship is actually to enable the scholars to do a bit of research, but do a bit of writing on their work and publish. And we are very happy at this point in time. We have 5 postdoctoral fellows at the Nilgiri Hills Center. We're also going to advertise for new fellowships next month. So if you really, I'm telling my friends, it will come out in EPW and many other, including Krea website. We're also sending it to other friends who then pass it on to various people. And so if you have your friends who are looking for a postdoctoral fellowship, I think you can also inform about Nilgiri Hills Center fellowship. With that, I think I'm delighted. This is a theme I think Karthick has been working on for a very long time, and I'm really looking forward to hearing this. And this is a very collective effort at the part of the center. So that as you can see, you can see Arun, everybody has kind of Christian, Savari, Samar, I think, online. So we're happy that this is happening. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mahapatra, for your kind words. Now I would request Dr. P. Arun to introduce the speaker of the talk to the audience.
A warm welcome to everyone. Let me briefly introduce our speaker, Dr. Karthick Narayanan. We sometimes fondly call him Baba because of the knowledge he holds. So, Dr. Karthick holds PhD in Linguistics from Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His core area of expertise is social linguistics, language documentation, and digital archiving. He has keen interest in digital language, data management, and preservation of endangered languages. He is passionately committed to safeguarding linguistic diversity and utilizing the potential of digital tools to protect and promote traditional practices and knowledge systems. He held research positions at several institutions such as the Central Institute for Indian Languages, Sahitya Academy, and Sikkim University. He is co-author of a book titled Marum Ulagil, Mariye Ulagil, published by Sahitya Academy. This book documents oral literary tradition of the Toda tribe residing in Nilgiri Hills. He played a pivotal role in developing India's first endangered language archive, SIDLA, which is Sikkim Darjeeling Himalayas Endangered Language Archive. At our center, Dr. Karthick is currently carrying out research on language endangerment with the multilingual Toda and Kota tribes. He is also working along with Dr. Sumitra Ranganathan, to create a prototype for a multivocal archive dedicated to preserving India's intangible cultural heritage. Thank you. I would request Dr. Karthik to come.
Warm good afternoon and thank you all for coming here. I know most of you have to choose between two talks. Even I have to choose my own talk over violence. I'm equally eager to listen to his talk on the local, especially on the local region, Mulligadan and psychology. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Before I start the talk, a few acknowledgements. So what I'm going to talk here and present here, part of it comes from the lived experience of Todas, and I've been fortunate enough to engage with them much more closely and more intimately at some places, and it's a privilege that I'm presenting about them here. So I first acknowledge their contribution in my talk. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I'm going to talk about two things. So one is going to be on language endangerment and the other is on policy. But before I talk about language endangerment with Todas themselves, I'll be briefly talking about what I'm doing and how I'm doing this. So I come from a very different discipline. I don't see another linguist on board here, except for one. Thank you, ma'am. So I come from a very different tradition of doing social sciences. So I'll talk a bit about what I do and how I do it, and what are the objects of my study and how I approach them, and then I'll go into the story of the Todas. Is it okay? Thank you. I have a tendency to speak a lot, so 40 minutes is my clock. Please feel free to stop me if you have any doubts in between. So these are the overviews of my talk. So I'll be talking about 8 simple sections, not a lot, but let's go into. So before I start off, India's linguistic heritage. While I know this is a common knowledge, but as a linguist, I have some specificity to add to it. So some of the specificity that you can see here is something called as a Greenberg's Linguistic Diversity Index. So it's basically an index, a tool, an analytical tool that measures the likelihood of, like if you pick 2 people from India, and what is the likelihood of them speaking the same language. So if you look at this, so we have the difference is 91%. So the likelihood of not speaking the same language is 91%. That's what India's linguistic diversity is. So we are a dense nation. So we are in the top 10 when it comes to linguistic diversity. Now within this small map, I have actually not just shown India map. There's also the map is also problematic for other political reasons, but I'm going ahead with it. Now the map is a South Asian larger map. The boundaries are just imagined boundaries anyway. Now the map tells you an overlapping shades of color rather than silos of color. So if you can see that we have these regions that are going to be colored overweight. So you can see that the southernmost tip, which is basically considered Dravidian, is also found here, and the colors, they all intermingle. So that's how Indian tradition is. So apart from the 2 language families that have lightened, Iranian language and Mauritian languages, all other language families are found in India. So Indo-Aryan languages, Dravidian languages, Austroasiatic, Sino-Tibetan, more popularly known as Tibeto-Burman, Tai-Kadai languages, again very small family, but mostly found in the Arunachal Pradesh of India. Jarawa and Onge found in the Andaman Islands, and Andamanese, sorry, Jarawa and Onge is found in the Andaman Islands, and Andamanese now unfortunately restricted to Little Andaman. And then we have few unclassified languages, that is those languages which do not belong to any of those groups. So 2 popular languages, one is Nihali in Maharashtra, the other is Burushaski in Jammu Kashmir. Okay, now putting numbers on the board. Now I showed you a map of colors, but can I put a number on the board here? Unfortunately, it's the most difficult task. Indian linguistic repertoire is characterized by diversity. 4 language families are the major ones. Apart from that, I told you there are other ones. So new proposed, so some of the ones like Andaman and Jarawa are newly proposed language family. Similarly, Tai-Kadai is also newly proposed language family. These have not yet been attested, but as a linguist, I know for a fact that they will be attested soon and they are the same. But determining the precise number of languages spoken in all of these families is really difficult. One of the reasons is, I'll be talking about the reasons as well, but if you look at the numbers here, if you look at the numbers here, you will recognize that Census of India 1961 gives you a very interesting number called 1652 mother tongues. They use the word mother tongues, not languages. Now, census of 2011, census 2021 has not happened. Let's not talk about it. It gives us 1369 mother tongues. There is this change in the number between 1652 and 1369. These 1369 mother tongues are then grouped and classified into scheduled languages and non-scheduled languages, 22 scheduled languages, including 123 dialects of those scheduled languages, and 99 non-scheduled languages, including 147 dialects of those non-scheduled languages. Then you have another ministry coming up and then giving out a new number, unpublished. It's just called Language BR. You can all find it out. That's called as Ministry of Education, and it says there are 1548 mother tongues in India. Again, what is the source? Assume that it is Central Census of India, but which year I have no idea. Then there are two more. They have not mentioned it. It's just a document online. Ethnologue is another an evangelist body which documents languages across the world for evangelical purpose. They say that India only has 435 languages, less than what Ministry of Education acknowledges. And People's Linguistic Survey of India 2010 only claims that 780 languages are found in India. They also make a claim on the media, but not on paper, not on the books anywhere, that 500 languages have been lost since 1961. But unfortunately, that's not on the books, so I'm not claiming that. So that's the numbers when it comes to India. But like the colors, we are a spectrum. Okay, so a bit about the multilinguality of our country, why it is difficult to enumerate or put a number on the board. Fuzzy boundaries. The language structures are very fuzzy boundaries. You cannot distinguish where Bhojpuri ends and where Maghi ends, let's say in Bihar. Or you cannot really distinguish between where Tamil ends and Malayalam ends in Kanyakumari. So this is true, and we are right here in Toda, where Telugu and Tamil merges into one another into a very seamless language. Can't really disfigure, like can't really dismember it. This is Tamil and this is Telugu. So that's sort of an intense contact exists between the languages. So the boundaries become fuzzy. Now, when person speaks more than one language, for example, I speak more than one language, the languages that I keep on adding to my kitty are like an additive tool. They're not replaced. So they're all complementary with each other. So for example, I speak English here, with some of you I speak Tamil outside, with some of you I speak in a very different tone of English or a different style of English when I sit in the lounge. So these sorts of variation is also very important in Indian context. So it's all additive, never replaceable. Then the language identity is fluid. At times I can claim myself to be a Tamil. At times I claim myself to be a Madrasi Bhasha person. At times I claim myself also to be a Malayali Tamil person. At times I also claim myself to be a native Indian English speaker. So my identities are also fluid. So what happens is that our language and social boundaries are not coterminous. They don't end at the same point. So these are all extending and overlapping into each other. Similarly, you see at the structural level, intense borrowing. Not just at the lexical level, even at the syntactic level, even at the phonological level, that we borrow from each other's languages. And our languages are domain specific. I just told you that this room, I reserve a particular language for speaking. That's an academic domain in which I speak. I'll talk about what is a domain later. Then again, expanding language loyalty. One interesting thing that we observed in India is that there is an expanding language loyalty in the census over the last few years. Many people have started to consolidate around a particular name as their language. So some languages go up, some languages go down in the census of India. For instance, 2001 census had 122 languages in India, but 2011 census had 121 languages. Now this is because of people mobilizing around a particular name and claiming it to be the language. In the very first census of 1961, Hindi was just like all other languages. This was also minor language. Now this sort of consolidation of language identity is also happening, right, as we speak. But it also means that language boundaries and political boundaries. For example, Tamil Nadu, Tirupati is in Nellore, Tirupati, Chittoor, Tamil and Telugu. So the political boundaries and the boundaries don't match again. So the political boundaries also don't match, the social boundaries also don't match. So what is the result of this? I already gave a hint of it, that despite having at least 10 different language families, we have an areal similarity. Our languages are similar. So if you look at Trevor Noah, he makes fun of Indian languages but with one accent. Does not give, this is southern accent, this is northeastern accent, this is western accent. No, we all have certain common features that people can pick out. And those are much more than I can get into details of it, but not. So this phylogenetic diversity, despite that we have a huge similarity within our languages. Diglossic, then we have a high variety of a language and a low variety of language. For instance, the English that I speak and I write is a high variety in my, let's say, in a society where we are all scholars. So similarly, hyphenated existence. So you can have Indian English, you can have Madurai Tamil, you can have, let's say, Tada Telugu, Tada Tamil, both are possible. So this sort of hyphenated existence, multiple identities together, coexisting together. And no Indian state is the linguistic reorganization, even after the linguistic reorganization, none of our Indian states are heterogeneous in nature. We are all, or they're not homogeneous in nature. We are all heterogeneous. So this is the fluidity. This fluidity has been given a term called multilinguality, the state of linguistic competence and behavior, where code switching, moving from Tamil to English to Telugu, mixing Tamil and English, code mixing, partial linguistic competence. I know to speak Hindi very well, but the moment you start giving me a text in Hindi and ask me to read it, I'm so bad at it. I will read 2 lines in 1 hour. That's how bad I am. But at the same time, there are so many people who can read text so fastly, but they can't understand the text. So we have a functional limitation to our fluency. Now, this is a clear hallmark of Indian multilinguality as opposed to the Western one, where people are more interested in a sort of formalized fluency. So this is functional specialization of language is very common. Many Tamil women every day say a Sanskrit sloga while they do puja. But that's the only place where they can use Sanskrit, and they don't use Sanskrit itself. They don't even know what the meaning of it sometimes. So that is how functionally restricted our languages are. So this is the context of the Indian multilinguality. Now, okay, I'm going to talk about tribal languages. What is a tribal language? Is there anything tribal about a tribal language? No. It's not a category at all. It's not a category that refers to a particular type of languages. It is just an accidental term that has come about because of a particular administrative or legal structure in India. So it is just the Constitution of India says that these are the scheduled tribes, and then the speech forms spoken by them become the tribal languages. Tribal languages need not necessarily be unique to them. Sometimes they can also speak Hindi, sometimes they can also speak Tamil. So it's a very complex, rather it's not a category at all. That's what I'm trying to say. But how many are there? Like if there are tribes that have unique languages to themselves, how many are there? So if you look at the language census 2011, I told you we have 121 languages. Out of this, the 2021 census attest that 95 of them are spoken only by tribal communities. 2 scheduled languages of this, Santali and Bodo, okay, and 93 of them are non-scheduled languages. The mother tongue count, I'll talk about it later, but it's somewhere around 200. Okay, now I also went on a wild goose chase to collect all the language names of India. Now I recognize that in the census of India, languages spoken by or mother tongues spoken by less than 10,000 speakers are never released. That's from 1961. I'll be talking about what is it and why is it later. But languages spoken by less than 10,000 speakers number around 156. Of this, again, 93 of them are spoken by scheduled tribe population. So the proportion of this within this is almost around more than 60% safely is spoken by the scheduled tribes of India. So when it comes to the status of scheduled tribes in India, or the status of the tribal languages in India, this is how it is. Okay, at the top most of English and Hindi recognized to be official language of India, co-official language of India. At the second 2 are the scheduled languages, again 8th schedule of India, Article 33, that's all, those are Indian constitution articles that make scheduling possible, and then the dialects of India. So that's 123 mother tongues. The numbers you see are mother tongue numbers, not language numbers. Language and mother tongue are the same, but Indian administration makes a distinction between. And then below that is non-scheduled languages and the dialects of those non-scheduled languages that are 147, and below that is other languages, 1976 CCPA. Now CCPA is a Cabinet Committee for Parliamentary Affairs, 1976, that was launched to reform Indian census. Now the biggest reform that they did in the census domain is to hide away languages of languages that are reported less than 10,000 speakers. That's the biggest reform they have done. So now, India's linguistic hierarchy, linguistic diversity is mostly through the languages and the speech forms of the tribal communities. But have we done enough to promote them and preserve? That's a question that I'm going to ask. Okay, so I'm going to talk about language endangerment. There's quite a few biologists in the audience, so this is a metaphor that we directly borrow from the biologists. August Schillinger, a neo-German linguist or a neo-grammarian in the 1850s, borrows this directly from the biologists and decided to talk of languages as some organisms that evolve, branch out just like a tree model, and then they tried to conceptualize language itself as an organism that we can study. So this is a very positivist idea of studying languages, and this is the very earliest attestation of it. So using this model, then it becomes easier for us to talk about glotticide, that is a situation where a language A suddenly stops being existing. It could happen in cases like tsunami, for example in Indonesia it has been unfortunately reported, or it could happen in cases where there's a big volcano loss, again volcanic eruption, again in Indonesia. These are two examples that have been reported in Indonesia, where a language group the language A just stopped existing on one day. That's glotticide. The second one is what I am more interested, language shift, and that's what happens more continuation. People who speak language A leave language A behind and move to language B. Now this is what we term as endangerment. Again, the concept here is understood and conceptualized using an organic metaphor or life as metaphor rather than as systems or practice. So that's how we talk and communicate, and that's how we understand. So language is essentially practice, like you have to speak and you have to write or sing or say a story, but when linguists study it, that practice, the complex identity, the complex notion of practice is reduced to an organism. Okay, so hence we talk of evolution of language as well. Now, since I have talked about the organism, let's compare it with severity of endangerment across the two domains. So if you look at endangerment of language as opposed to mammals, birds, reptiles and amphibians, you can clearly see that language outshines, or other unfortunately outshines all the other kinds of endangerment. So if you can look at it, 6% of languages are already extinct as opposed to mammals, birds and reptilians. This is from a World Wildlife Fund report. That's where I taken the data from. Then critical 7% again, except for amphibians, language at the top. Endangered language is more endangered, again amphibians is at the bottom. Vulnerable, where the languages are most vulnerable for any loss. Habitat loss also endangers languages too. Data deficient, 5% of data is deficient. Overall, only 63% of our languages are safe. A very pessimistic calculation or a very pessimistic projection of the scenario is that by the turn of the century, more than 50% of the languages will be lost if left untouched. So that is the pessimistic, that is the most optimistic. The pessimistic one is the cross reference, which is like 90% of the world's linguistic diversity will be lost in 100 years. The optimistic one is 50% will be lost. So that's bad, how bad it is. Unfortunately, we don't have a Fridays for language. We don't have a Greta Thunberg for languages. I wish we had, but that's the reality. So I've told you that it is actually a complex practice, language is a complex practice, and we are reducing it to an organism, again a reduction. But is there something that characterizes language endangerment? Restricted language use in the speech community, loss of prestige, perception in native speakers' well-being. I have spoken about it with some of you, but I can speak about it later if we have time. Reduction of linguistic complexity, loss of competence, disruption of intergenerational transmissions. These are some of the things that we commonly agree are things that happen to a language when it is endangered. But linguists don't have a consensus on what or why a language is getting endangered. So, next, endangerment in India. So that's also there. So two statistical bodies have come up. Language vitality count by ethnologue says that most of our languages are stable. More than 40% is unstable. So you have endangered is 131 and extinct is almost 11. But very interestingly, government self-reported data on the World Atlas of Languages hosted by UNESCO tells us that only 19% of our languages are safe. They claim there are 245 languages in India. Again, Ministry of Education has fed the data into this. So they claim only 19% of our languages are safe. The rest of them all endangered to a very degree. And for 8% there is no data, but from my experience, they'll also claim that those are also endangered. Okay, so that's how bad is endangered. So I'm going to talk about then one community here, the Todas. So who are the Todas? I might have spoken to you a lot about the Todas. Many of you might have heard it too many times that it will be so boring for you. But the Todas are the Nilgiri. Todas are a community in the Nilgiri Island, Highland Island rather. So the Nilgiris is located in the tri-junction between Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Kerala. So these are the small pastoral group. When I mean small, their number since independent has never crossed 2,000 speakers or 2,000 community members. They consider themselves autochthonous to the autochthonous community of the hills. They address themselves not as Todas. That's again a name that we as outsiders gave them. They address themselves all. The very la with a dot at the bottom tells you that this is a very special la. It's a la that you produce without producing any vocal cord vibration, which is a very rare sound for a Dravidian language. So it means men or it means people, and their language is called Posh. Again, Posh is from Basha, the example of intense contact and borrowing that I was just talking about. So that's what it is. So Todas are believed to have been isolated at least for 1,300 years from the rest of the Dravidian population when they moved into the Nilgiri Hills. And their language is one of the critically endangered language. We'll see what is there. Pastoralism, their life is all about pastoralism, or their life was all about pastoralism. Their religious practice revolved around their deity cult, and their language marked Toda to be very aberrant. So the la, as I told you, is a very rare feature. Similarly, Toda has one of the rarest of the rare features in the consonantal structure in the world, so much so that it's a case study for many works. So they are an aberrant, often considered an aberrant in the rest of the Dravidian communities. Since the accession of the British rule in Hills, Todas were never going to be this unique again. Their demographic, economic activity, religious and expressive culture changed forever. So this is the location of the Todas. So these are the blocks of Nilgiris, and then you can see them that they are concentrated in the middle portion of the Nilgiris. So that is called as the Nilgiri High Plateau, or the Otacommon division within the Nilgiris. Some of them can be found in Kotagiri as well as in Kunda, but those are very few villages. But the rest of them, numbering almost to 75 regularly occupied villages, are scattered across this particular region in Nilgiris. So the Toda language, member of the Dravidian family, I may not go much into it. As I told you, that's one of the largest phoneme set in any Indian languages. 16 vowels, very similar to many Dravidian languages, but the consonantal system is more unique. 39 consonants with many rare articulatory contrasts. What do I mean by rare articulatory contrast is that the place of articulation, what is called as a place of articulation, there is very minute difference between these places of articulation, and they are maintained largely even till today. So Toda, like most of the Dravidian languages, is SOV and has a unique morphological, some unique morphological features, but I think that's not the interest here. So one of the notable features of Toda language is the register and stylistic difference. Now, what do I mean by register and stylistic difference? So formal events and non-formal events have two different types of languages. I'll be talking about them again. And if you sing and if you say a story, again the language changes it. For example, a two-syllable word in a spoken language will become a three-syllable word in a singing language. And this is like a norm. Everywhere it has to change. So similarly, the registered difference is sacred language and non-sacred language. For example, the word used for a churner that is used to make buttermilk, or that's used to produce butter, has three words. One for a normal language, one for the lowest grade temples, and other for the highest grade temples. So I'll be talking in terms of a parallels between ritual structure and the language structure itself. So that parallels also we will talk about, and then it also has significance in language loss. So what do I study then? Oh, sorry, I had a slide. What do I study? I study community's language choice. What is language choice? Language choice refers to the decision made in a speech event regarding the use of languages, not one, and style for expression in a communicative context. So, what language, what style do I use for a particular communicative event? That's what I'm trying to study. What are my questions? The language choice can be observed by asking these questions. Who speaks what language to whom and when? Who is the speaker in a speech event? What language is the form of language, literally the form of the language? Who is the participant or the interlocutors in the setting? And when is the spatio-temporal locale of the speech event? For example, seminar hall and the cafeteria or the lounge are two different spatio-temporal locale, and those two would mean that my language choice could differ or vary according to this locale. A classroom and a talk with a friend in your room or while you are walking are examples of those contexts. So again, how do I study them? Methods and objects. Because this is again a very complex concept, I have to reduce it to small objects. So what are the methods? So my method of study here is a departure from the conventional correlation and regression methods. Most of the people who do language maintenance study within social linguistics would take variables and see if the language choice vary along with it, and would either try to create a correlation and a regression to show this is why the X is the reason for the shift in language. That's not my method. My method is a mixed method approach, but dominantly qualitative. Sample size is mere 26, but these are 26 people whom I know intimately, with whom I spent quite a lot of time in their house, raising buffaloes along with them, and also trying to understand how they sing a song and what do they even mean. Because that's something that's very unique for me, so I have spent a lot of years with the Todas trying to do this. So these are people I know intimately well, and most of my data then comes from surveys, yes, participant observation, linguistic biography and autobiography, and focus group discussion. Focus group discussion was not planned. Since I know most of these people well, I sat with someone, started to talk about their language use. All the other family members started also giving opinions. So it just became a focus group discussion. Once it happened, the rest I just, okay, fine. There's no point in trying to have an interview here. Just have a focus group discussion. So I'm talking to I'm talking to a son in the family, mother joins. And both of them talk about their linguistic experience. So it is not anymore necessarily a one-to-one interview. That is also because of the nature of my involvement with them. So I can't necessarily tell, no, you can't come and sit in the thing. So that's how it became. So what do I study? So the three things that I'm studying for when I interact with the Todas or when I use the census methods are domains of language use, language attitude, and language ideologies or linguistic ideologies. Now, what is domains of language use? The habitual co-occurrence of a language and style in an interaction or an institutional context along with a group of interlocutors. For example, if a bunch of Bengali speakers come together and irrespective of wherever it is, they will start speaking Bengali, right? So for them, then the domain is characterized by having more Bengali speakers. Okay, even it could be a classroom, it could be a cafe, or it could be among Tamil speakers. Now similarly, Tamil speakers can also be accused of the same, Malayalam speakers can also be accused of the same. So this domain in that sense is a construct that we made by looking for co-occurrence of languages with interactional setting or an institutional context and with a group of speakers. So it's sort of a triad. Within this is where the domain of language use is located. Language attitudes are basically persons' views and how they evaluate language and linguistic behavior of themselves and others. And language ideologies are slightly different. These are two different notions. One comes from a social linguistic tradition, the other comes from a linguistic anthropological tradition. But both of them have a very minor difference. One is about a person's view, the other is about a conception, the cultural conception of the language. So how do you see a language? Do you see a language as a tool of communication? No, that's a linguistic ideology. Or do you see a language as an expression of identity? Again, a linguistic ideology. These are very different from a language attitude that says that English is necessary for mobility. Right? Thinking of English as necessary for mobility is an attitude. But thinking of English as a language of modernity is an ideology. So these are two slightly similar but different ones. So these are the things that I'm trying to study. When I study domains of language use, language attitude, and language ideologies. You can call them by variables, but not necessarily these are variables. So what we found? So we find that there is a disruption in habitual use of language in Toda. Now the Todas, as I spoke to you, as I already informed you, are multilingual people. They at least speak more than 3 languages. At least most of them speak more than 2 languages. Many of them are trilingual. Some of them don't claim that they speak X, Y, Z because their idea of speaking means that you have to know how to write, read, and also communicate fluently. So that idea, again, in linguistic ideology, prevents them from calling themselves multilingual, but most of them are multilingual. Most of them speak more than 3 languages. What are the most commonly spoken language apart from Toda? Tamil, Baduga, English, Kannada, Malayalam, Hindi, and Kota, another tribal language spoken in the Nilgiri Hills. So if you can see that the local languages are the ones that are most frequently reoccurring, and that's how their multilingual repository is. So they at a given context, a Toda has at least Tamil and Toda to choose from. At least some might have also more than 2 languages, or 3 languages to choose from. So Toda use across domains. If you look up Toda use across domains, very interestingly, Tamil seems to be dominant. Now, this might have not been the case before 1900s. This is now the case because of addition of institutions within the Toda lifestyle or within the Toda life, not necessarily a replacement. And please.
So there's a graph of percentage among Todas who speak.
Toda, yes. I'm not talking only about the Todas, not about the rest.
Okay.
Not about the rest who can speak Tamil. Okay. So the inclusion of Tamil, for example, school and other institutional setups that have been modern institutions that have been added into the Toda cultural world are also is partly recommended for, partly reason for it. But I'm not more interested in this necessarily age group. If you can see, when I said that there is a timeline when it expanded, you can see that the oldest member of the Toda speaks more to Toda than Tamil. When you look at the youngest member of the Toda, they speak more Tamil than Toda. So this is again their participation in the modern institution. That's what it tells about and nothing else. So this is called as the Great American Change or the verticalization in the American model, where more and more communities started to rely upon outside institutions rather than the institutions within community. So institutions outside are functioning through Tamil or English, and you have to use Tamil. So that's how it is. Secondly, this is what I'm more interested in. So this is use of Toda with Toda interlocutors. I'm not interested in use of Toda outside Toda. The habitual use of Toda would have been with Toda interlocutor. Now this is where I see a problem. Toda Tamil seems to be a choice between Tamil and Toda. I can shift between both. I can mix both. Again, something that has not been very popular and even it's not even popular now, seems to be increasing predominantly at certain sections with members of the same communities outside their own dwellings. So the outside the one, it's very small, sorry. So if Toda speakers speak, if 2 Toda speakers, as I just told you, if 2 Bengali speakers, Tamil speakers, Malayalam speakers come together, we just speak in a language. But if 2 Toda speakers come together, sometimes, or at least my study says it, considerable amount of time, they would not necessarily choose only Toda. They would speak Tamil outside, even if they're just talking to themselves. And I've been a witness to this on many occasions. I go for shopping with them. I told you I've gone to the I've lived with them, so I've observed them. I observed this happen more often than less. So most often in buses, even if 2 Toda speakers are there, they just speak Tamil, not Toda. There are certain reasons for it. I will discuss about them later. Now, so disruption. So is there a disruption? So do community members acknowledge those disruptions? So I have observed them. So do they observe those disruptions? As I told you, I speak a lot with people. I listen to their stories. So this is a story from this is part of a snapshot of an ongoing conversation with a member of the Pilgosh village. I don't want to name him. So he says 2 incidents he recalls. One incident he says that there was a Toda meeting organized by the Todas for the Todas, and in that meeting, that some Todas started to speak Tamil, and they objected it. So once the objection started, those who started speaking Tamil stopped, said a few words in Toda, and left the meeting. So this is an official. It's called a Neum, Toda Neum. So earlier Toda Neums, its cultural council used to happen in a vast grassland. Today it happens in the HADP hall, where we recently also had our meeting. of the Nilgiri Hills conference. So that's also the place where Toda's cultural council also meets these days. And it is even in this cultural council that people have started to use Tamil. But yes, there is a pushback to it. But more and more, the generation that Pilgosh belongs to is of the age group of 50 to 75. And more youngsters are getting comfortable with the idea of speaking in Tamil. Even in normal, even in contexts where only Toda speakers are available. Now, why do they so? What is it? They believe speaking in Tamil, they have become civilized. He refers to an example of a Badiga leader who went to the parliament and spoke in Badiga even in parliament. But he confidently told me that no Toda, even if they reach the parliament, will do that. Okay, so that's what he's contrasting with. So he says that his community thinks that speaking in Tamil is more civilized. Okay, he's asking me, they all believe that speaking in Tamil is the prestige. They are not even bothered by the wealth that being Toda offers them. Being Toda offers them really a lot of land. So the central portion of the Nilgiris that we saw are basically Toda lands. Of varying degree of ownership, but they are all basically Toda lands. Any of the major tourist attractions that you have went to in Uti, shooting spot, very commonly called, or 9th May, it's completely Toda land. It's in their name. It's not even forest department land. So there's a lot of wealth of being a Toda. So they have a lot of economic access. But despite that, they believe that speaking in Tamil is a prestige. Another interesting thing, so I'll talk about this register style variation. Naming practice. Toda naming practice has been studied widely by Emino. He created at least 3 papers out of naming papers, the naming practice, so much so that I can't write about it anymore. Now this practice invariably identifies 2 things. That Toda's ritual structure, or Toda's idea about ritual purity and affinity, is also seen in the idea about naming. This is again exactly what I'm talking about, linguistic ideology. So they have a cultural conception that names should also reflect on the sacredity of the Todas. The Toda's sacredity is like this: men are considered sacred, women are considered polluting. Again, a very South Asian thing. Even though they are in highland Nilgiris, they are still South Asian. Okay, so the very South Asian concepts still exist. Now, as I told you, that sacred language and normal language has a difference. They take the men's name from the sacred language and the women's name from the normal language. Now, this is a cultural practice that existed until at least 1950s, completely. And uninterrupted, this practice existed until 1950s, and the names recorded in 1930 clearly shows that very few names of men and women. At 1930, there were only 800 speakers of 800 Toda community members. So the Emino went there and started just listing down all 800 names. And we could see from that list that all those names were uniquely Toda. Even if they were borrowed into Toda and Todai's. Like how do you anglicize the Hindi word? How do you anglicize the Tamil word? They're Todai's. And then, so it is a Toda name. But today, I'm studying in 2014, and my continuity with the community, my engagement with the community starts in 2015. That seems to be breaking. And this, so naming practice of individuals now started to break. So this naming practice is also at the center of the Toda culture. Toda religion and its ritual is all about the separation of the sacred from the profane. Their language structures were also separated. Prose for normal, poetry for sacred. Ritual vocabulary for sacred diary and normal vocabulary for the house. Men's names for the sacred, men's names are from sacred languages and women's names were from normal language. So this is a unique practice that existed in the Toda. But what happened to the practice? It's waning away. So much so that there is this unique practice is given away to what we call it double naming system. They have a Toda name because it is required for the ritual purpose, and they have a name which is for the school, which is for the modernity. Okay. Now I've been talking to there's an interview of me with 4 young men. They openly say that my names are modern Tamil names, our names are modern Tamil names, but we gave them because it sounds better when we write it on a school form. When we write our regular Toda name, Tilnesh Kutan, or Shenjish Kutan, or Pishpit Kutan, these are all Toda names, they think that they are subjected to mockery in school. And teachers make fun of it. Experience says that teachers make fun of it. And it is a matter of joke at many times. So This is completely given away to a new naming system where we have Ajit, where we have even Abhisheka, Anita, Radha, Radhakili, and Ajit, Santosh, Varun, Sampath, Charles is Dinesh. Okay, I asked him. He's a very good friend of mine. I asked him, why did you keep it? Who gave you the name Charles? He said, I gave it to myself, and he wants to be known as Charles, not as Dinesh. Okay, so these are people that whom I know very well. So these are the names that they're most common in use, and not anymore names like Mongshen, which is basically a name of the bell at Ormand, which is a very sacred name of a bell. A bell is a sacred object in a temple in a dairy culture. So that bell is called Mongshen. That name is not used anymore. It's found in the custom Oj. Oj is again a name. It's a sacred referent that refers to a conical dairy in Nosh village. Konash village. I am not okay. I'll show you that later. Nipa refers to a watering place next to the Noshband. These are all sacred. Water is sacred. The rocks are sacred. The hills are sacred. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can see them. So these are all sacred names. So these names were given to men before. Mongshen, the name of a bell, at Ormand, Oj, a cosm of the colonial diary. It's 40 minutes up, I have to go and Nosh, again, these are the names of men. And if you look at women's name, Amdifai, it's basically Amman Devi, that's what it translates to, female goddess. Aril, pebbles, the word for pebble is Aril. Kobe flea, a red flower, basically, it's look like this. It's a brass drinking vessel, Kob means a brass drinking vessel, Poof is a flower, and Pili is a silver. So a combination, a compound of this is the name of a woman's name. But all of this is now replaced with Anita, Abhilasha, Abhisheka, Radha, Radhakili, Meena. So it's very common. Now, why? Is because, as I told you, the name has become a source of joke at many places, especially in schools. Mock and scold have become a very common place for the school-going children. So I am asking someone from the village of Atal, would your teacher chide you if you speak Toda in school? Yes, they will scold us and warn us not to speak in Tamil. Why? Because the teachers won't understand what we speak. Are teachers really bothered about what children speak? I just don't know. Seriously, I don't want to be. I have also taught. I was never bothered. But this teacher doesn't, even though doesn't understand the language, still doesn't want them to speak the language. Is it really? I asked him, is it really because they don't understand what you speak? The boy said yes. He just finished his 11th standard, considering moving to the 12th, but thinking of dropping out too. But this is the experience of using Toda in a school where there were quite few other Toda speakers. Another person, again from the Kashmir, a very close friend of mine, she says, my brother would feel shy to speak Toda in school, as I feared people would mock that. But I spoke in Toda. So this is again a very common reality, that men in community seems to feel more shame rather than the women in the community. Now, this is not only relegated to teachers in schools. Even a very famous Tamil grammarian, G. Pope, who was the first person who is now a person of controversy in Tamil Nadu, the first person acknowledged to translate Tirukkural and Tiruvasagam. When he described Toda, even he called it, their speech sounds like old canaries spoken in the teeth of a gale of wind. Basically a mockery in a high language. And this is in the grammar of Toda, the G. Henry Harkins, the first person to describe Toda, the first Britisher to describe Toda, calls Toda a difficult language. So an idea that Toda is something that is very different from us, something that is very not normal, is very regular. G. Pope even also calls Todas buffaloes. Todas are like their buffaloes. He calls openly, does not mince the word. Todas are like their buffaloes. Lazy. So that's a sort of a cultural conception that has been building up from the early 1800s, from the time Nilgiri Hills was exposed to the British colonization. So, speak Toda at home. Now, it doesn't stop there. So I have this free-flowing conversation with two daughter-in-laws of Kashmir. very close friends of mine, both of them. I'm more often considered a member of their house, a member of their clan. So I asked them, have your school teachers ever complained about your Tamil skills? Now, both of them replied, one after another. During the first standard, such complaints were very regular, as the children would mix Toda in Tamil and speak. The initial years of school are often very tough, as Toda children would not understand things that happens in school. And later on, as they move in class 2, they begin to learn Tamil. But teachers will insist with the parents that you should speak Tamil at home. Only then the children will learn it. And they will also tell our parents that it is because of speaking Toda at home that the children are not able to grasp things faster. Even now, some teachers of our children, these are two daughters who have, both of them have two kids, must be in 6th or 7th now, have even instructed, they're in private schools, not in government schools, have even instructed us that we should speak Tamil. So their parents had the same experience, they have the same experience. Almost 25 years later. They told the same thing to my father, the other daughter in my says, and are telling the same thing to me too, after I became a mother. Only when you speak Tamil at home, your children will learn Tamil, otherwise they won't. So this sort of an imposition of not to speak Toda, speak not, sort of a prohibited to use Toda, even at homes is being communicated through school teachers. Now, no school policy, no education policy tells the school teacher or gives the school teacher any right to dictate what language could be spoken at home. But yes, it happens. Now, can it happen to a Tamil speaker today? It could happen 10 or 15 years before, but not in the same tone that it is being told to the Todas. But can it happen today? No. So next. So the language then becomes a source of a saying to the Todas. Okay? Their names don't find any space in the registries. It is not so modern, it's joke sounding, that's what my informants always call them. And always tell them with their names. It is considered even non-Asian, they think Todas don't belong to us. Todas don't belong amongst us. Many early scholars have written and talked about Toda as non-Asian in origin. And this myth is very common even today with a lot of people in tea and TVs, also among the rest of the population. One of the reasons is that the language sounds very different from the rest of the Dravidian languages, even though it is very clearly Dravidian. It sounds very different. And most often, they are made to believe Toda is the language of the savage and Tamil is the language of the Nagariga. Tamil is the language of the civilization. That is what they are made to. Now, is this accidental? That's a question that I'm asking. Are the Toda kids' experience, is it unique and is it accidental? Or is it just a coincidence? These are very bad teachers and these are very bad people who are xenophobic, that's why they're behaving like this? The actually answer is no. This is probably a more deeper systemic trouble than it has been acknowledged. So, managing multilinguality. Trying to deny tribal languages its space has been the only management solution or the only governing solution that India has taken. If you look at this data, 2011 census tells that there are 19,569 raw returns. So in the census there is a question, what is your mother tongue? Okay, so that's the number of returns that I got. Many languages, many documents, including Ministry of Education documents, claim this to be language numbers, but they are not. What happens after that is because, okay, why I am saying that? If someone comes to me and asks me what language do you speak, I say I speak Karthiki. They have to record it. That's the rules. Tomorrow all the Krea members decided to tell that we speak Krea as our language. They have to record it. Okay, I speak banana as the language. You have these names, I have also seen them in the raw entries. They have to record it. That's the rule. Whatever you say, because the enumerator is some school teacher or some government clerk who has no idea about what are these things. So what are they supposed to do? Just record as they say. But sometimes they even don't do that. They think this is what the language you speak and they write it down. But that's another topic to speak about. 2001, this number was 6,661. 1991, 10,400. Again, fluid identity is happening here, if you can see. Now, we put this number to a magical box called rationalization. 19,000 magically reduces to those numbers here. Now, these racialization happen through a system or through sort of a practice, not necessarily through well-established knowledge. The Gerson's Linguistic Survey of India comes out with a bunch of names and dialects, but I have to also tell you here that Gerson's Linguistic Survey of India did not cover the whole of India. Madras Presidency was never part of it, to begin with, right? So Gerson's Linguistic Survey of India is then not a complete linguistic survey of India. So there was a demand for a new linguistic survey of India, but it never came through. I can talk about the reasons for it later. So from this, then basing this solution, I decided to classify group these numbers to a mother tongue, what we call mother tongue, not necessarily languages, right? So those mother tongues are unique speech forms. 2011, there are 270 speech forms. 2001, there are 234 speech forms. 1991, there are 216 speech forms. So over the 3 years, you can see that it's progressively increasing because people are becoming conscious about the language identity. And how are languages recognized? They claim that we take linguistic descriptions into account, but no, just a claim, it's just a paper claim. So these languages are then grouped, these mother tongues are then grouped into language and dialect. Linguist, you go and ask a linguist what is the difference between a language and a dialect, they will say there is nothing like that. One can be a language and can be a dialect at the same time. These are not real scientific concepts. Okay, so this ambiguity in science, or rather this sort of complex existence of the language is then taken, and the state has to manage it. So they do rationalization, classification, and reporting, where they only report languages that have more than 10,000 speakers and deny all the languages that are spoken by less than 10,000 speakers. Toda is one such language. Kota and other languages is one such language. Okay, so many other languages spoken by small community members, small communities in India, especially tribal communities, are languages that are less than 10,000. So they are not given a space in the language list of India. So even the state says that your language doesn't belong in the list. So they are lumped together. So let's come back here. It's the same thing that we saw here. So this last other languages are literally othered languages, not other languages. They are the othered languages of India, who are lumped together, unnamed and unrecognized. Now, this is an experience that many of us may not share in the room, but this is an experience that a huge population of India shares. That is 0.18% of the population of India shares. It is within this 0.18% of the population of India, some 10 crores of the population is where the highest density of languages is. The next slide. So what about the constitutional guarantees? Are there constitutional guarantees for languages? There are a lot. So I don't want to go through each and every one of them. We can take, there are few of them. Article 29, 30, 358, 345, 120, Right to Education Act very recently. But a very interesting observation to be made here is mother tongue / home language. This home language is often being interpreted as regional language for some weird reason. Okay, but I'll talk about it more in the next slide. So these are all the provisions that exist. They are there, but are they useful? Do they turn out to be implemented as policies? So starting from Kothari Commission and the National Education Policy 1968, I know it is a very weird way of doing content analysis, but let's just go through this. Kothari Commission clearly says that mother tongue should be the medium of education. Translation to National Education Policy vanished. It is not there. National Education Policy 1968 does not talk about mother tongue to be the source of education, even though the Kothari Commission's report clearly acknowledges. Kothari Commission report even goes on to say in the same breath that even Rabindranath Tagore acknowledges that it is the medium of mother tongue is the best medium to which an early child can learn. But no, we are not worried about it. Fine, let's go on. So the three-language formula first evolved in the Conference of the State Education Ministers as a scheme in 1949, gets a center space in the National Education Policy 1968. NEP 1968 was eager to make Hindi a medium of education for all, not just, even though Kothari Commission was very clear, the National Education Policy did not have a very radical interpretation of the text. But NEP does not include the Kothari Commission's recommendation of mother tongue as a medium. Even Kothari Commission was eager to shift students away from regional languages as fast as possible. So if you look at this one text here, so here this text says that for the first 2 years of the primary school is when we will have the medium of education as mother tongue. The rest we won't. So that people have to be shifted to a regional language. Then next, 1986, the next education policy comes up. Again, focus on the implementation of the three-language formula. They acknowledge the three-language formula has been wrongly implemented. They also point out to many mistakes that we most commonly speak about today, where a classical language as opposed to South Indian language is used in the northern states. All of this is there. They even seek to develop textbooks, but for only those communities that have more than 1 lakh speakers. Seeks to expand even regional languages to higher education. But none of this ever turned out to be true. So soon after this comes out a 1992 program of action, again another education policy with slight modification to 1986. Okay, they even sought to set a minimum level of learning of language for elementary stage, but it is for mother tongue or regional language, we are not sure. Because even though they say that a minimum level should be established at the elementary level, their policy did not talk about mother tongue education. In fact, they also went on to say, in the context of difficulties, switch over to modern Indian/regional language has to be ensured as early as possible. What is this? What is the difficulty? What difficulty are they talking about? Even 1986 has this. It's a ditto copy from 1986. Producing books, training teachers in mother tongues. If they turn out to be difficult, no problem. Shift to regional language or any other modern Indian language. That is absolutely fine. Now, the mother tongue seems to have a or in relationship. Mother tongue or regional languages should be studied from the primary stage to the end of the secondary stage. So the policy is satisfied even if you study in the regional language, not necessarily your mother tongue. So the notion of slash is liberally used when it is always spoken about mother tongue, but a very warm breeze of progressive thought came in NCF 2005, which is National Curriculum Framework 2005, rereading of the program of action under NEP 1992 or 1986. They, for the first time, NCF also has a close connection with, has a connection with Krea, because one of the members wrote the NCF is also Ramchandra. So they come out with a very radical reading, a real radical reading of the, or rather a progressive, inclusive reading of the policies. They say that mother tongue should be the medium of instruction. Very clearly acknowledges that. Language, what they also go on to say, what is a language? It's a language that we use at the home, or we speak as mother tongue, or language that we speak with kins, neighbors and others, that we naturally acquire from our society, not something that is learned. Home language of the children as defined above, that's defined above, should be the medium of learning in schools. So they are very clear. NCF has an explicit also understanding of the link between language and social justice. It clearly recognizes that dropout rate in tribal communities is linked to language or medium of education in schools. Emphasize on the need to have mother tongue or home language as the medium of instruction, even if the communities are small. So the difficulty clause of the 1992 have to be have been read or have been read down. Even if the communities are small, you should give mother tongue instruction. And also acknowledge the gap between a teacher training and material production. So NCF in that sense 2005 was progressive and inclusive. I'm using the word in a very clear connotation, in a very clear political connotation, but NEP 2020, welcome to the reality. Now the reality is very different. Here, wherever possible is when you use your mother tongue. Use your mother tongue wherever possible. Fine. Don't do a lot. Wherever possible, use mother tongue as an education, medium of education. If not, use regional language. If not, use local language. So don't make a fuss about mother tongue as a medium of education. That's what the NEP says. Even though press releases of NEP is very radically different from the text itself. So here I do. It is well. So they also clearly says it is well understood that young children learn and grasp non-trivial concepts more quickly in their home language and mother tongue. Even trivial complex concepts in their mother tongue. Fine. Wherever possible, medium of instruction, at least until grade 5, but preferably till grade 8 and beyond, will be the home language. Again, an existence in or. Home language or mother tongue or local language or regional language. So fulfill one of this. This is a very broad basket. Take one, you are done. Right? So, okay, good. That is there wherever possible. They also shed tears over how Indian language has not been looked after for so many years. It's good, acknowledged. MT and HL are very valuable for very valuable mother tongues, medium of instruction. But why use it only whenever possible? And what about books? Do NEP speaks of books? Speaks in the no. Very clearly at one point NEP says, I'm done. Very clearly NEP says at one point, if it is difficult to, if you don't have a book, the teacher should just speak in the regional language or the local language. No problems. Don't ask for books. So the document is, they also learn, all efforts will be made early on to ensure that any gaps that exist between the language spoken by the children and is bridged. In case where home language textbooks materials is not available, the language of transaction between teachers and students will remain the home language / mother tongue wherever possible. So that's all. The wherever possible is what NEP 2020 is about. And textbook development, they have a paragraph. Notation. 17 that says philanthropic activity you will do, public philanthropy activity you will do, textbook production. So great. So that is NEP 2020. So Toda in this context is within definitely Indian language. So fuzzy boundary between the language and the domain. Toda language undergoing a process of severe attrition. That's all. Basically, just take it for granted. Toda is endangered. Now, why? This is the last slide. Now, you see that top-down structure disenfranchises Toda language from 1981. 1971 census itself withholds the number of languages spoken by less than 10,000 speakers. Sort of an asymmetric power distribution, very small community. So they don't have a voice in the education system. It's completely suppressed. Policy of education motivates language and expansion of all these dominant languages, so-called regional and local languages. States' linguistic ideology determines the vitality of minority languages. States' formal curriculum establishes the othering of the tribes like Toda. I can keep on going on the list of 670 tribes, 700 tribes in the scheduled list today. And there is a hidden curriculum. How teachers and peers behave with these students. How they also participate in this hidden curriculum, or rather this exercise of hidden curriculum that others tribal children constantly. When your name is called out, laughing in class. When you speak in Toda, get chided by the teacher. So this sort of a hidden curriculum is also involved. So therefore Indian schooling, in a very authoritarian sense, is the ideological state apparatus. But here the ideological state apparatus is enforcing a monolingual ideology over the state as opposed to multilingual reality of the nation. Thank you. This is the morning talk.